This is Our League, an introduction to Canada's Grey Cup and the CFL. On the Canadian Football News Network, with CFNN anchors Celia and Kyle, special features reporter Margot, technology reporter Isabella, and Little Earl.
Hello and welcome to the Canadian Football News Network.
Our program takes an informative and fun look at the Canadian Football League and the Grey Cup.
On today's segment, we are going to discuss the beginnings of the Canadian Football League.
We'll learn where the CFL came from and when it began. Little Earl has some fascinating stories for us, and we'll hear from our technology reporter, Isabella.
And Margot has a special feature on the cheer teams. Cheerleaders are for sure my favorite part about football.
From what I've seen, they certainly add to the atmosphere of a football game. But let's start by going to our famous field reporter, Little Earl, who will explain the early beginnings of the CFL.
Thanks, kids. The Canadian Football League started in 1958. However, the Grey Cup, which is the CFL's championship trophy, was first given out in 1909 to the University of Toronto, the team that won the Senior Amateur Football Championship of Canada. The actual Grey Cup trophy was donated by Governor-General Earl Grey. Since that time, the CFL and the Grey Cup have had a colorful history. In the 1920s, it was mostly university teams that made up the league. Then, in the 1930s and 40s, there were a lot of military teams because of the Second World War. It wasn't until the 50s and 60s that the CFL started to look like it does today. For example, that's when they first started to wear helmets and some of the other safety equipment they wear now.
Well, Earl, that's fascinating stuff.
Earl, I believe you've got another interesting story about the beginning of the Grey Cup Festival. Back to you.
The Grey Cup Festival really got going in 1948 in Toronto, when people came from all across Canada to celebrate. During Grey Cup week, Toronto was taken over by Westerners who had a lot of fun all week long. Their antics included riding horses through the prestigious Royal York Hotel and taking part in parades and dances. Since that time in November of 1948, the Grey Cup has been much more than just a football game. It's become a national party in each host city.
Wow, that horse in the lobby was cool.
And that explains how the Grey Cup Festival began. Thanks, Little Earl. We now go to our CFNN special reporter, Margot, who has a report on the evolution of the CFL cheer teams.
Thanks, gang. The looks and routines of the CFL cheer teams sure have changed a lot over the years. You can see that in the outfits worn back in the last century. In the old days, the cheer teams were made up of girls that carried pom-poms and did very simple routines. Now, you'll even find some guys on the teams who add incredible acrobatics to the routines. They do that a lot here in Edmonton, where I had the pleasure of being a member of the Edmonton Eskimos cheer team. I can tell you that being on a CFL cheer team is a lot of fun, but takes a lot of dedication and practice.
Thanks, Margot. Now let's go live to our CFNN newsroom, where our technology reporter, Isabella, has another special feature on how technology has affected the CFL game.
Like all sporting leagues, technology has made a big difference for the CFL. In the early days, coaches on different parts of the field couldn't talk to each other. Today, coaches have these cool headsets and other electronic devices so they can talk to each other from any place in a football stadium. This is really helpful during a game. And another really cool thing is that some of the players have wireless devices right in their helmets. Now a quarterback can hear the plays being called to him by his coaches. That means he doesn't have to call a timeout and go to the sidelines to talk about the play with his coaches. Technology has and will continue to play a big role in today's CFL. Thanks, Isabella. We'll now go back to Lil Earl for a report on today's CFL.
Thanks, gang. A CFL game is played on a field that is 110 yards long and 60 yards wide. A yard is almost as long as a meter. The field is marked with white lines to show the yardage for the players. There are white posts called uprights at each goal line that are used for kicking field goals. The end of each field is called the end zone. Each game is 60 minutes long and is broken into 4 time frames called quarters that are 15 minutes each. There's also a break after 30 minutes that is known as halftime. We'll run over the CFL rules in more detail in our next segment.
Thanks, Little Earl. We learned a lot today. So that brings us to our review section.
Let's do a recap of our key learning points today.
We learned that the first Grey Cup was played in 1909, and the trophy was donated by Governor General Earl Grey.
And Little Earl told us that the Grey Cup Festival began in 1948 when Westerners invaded Toronto, creating their own party.
We learned that a CFL game is 60 minutes, and there are 4 15-minute quarters in a game.
That's all the time we have for this segment. Don't forget to review your handbook. It's a lot of fun.
Tomorrow, Little Earl will help us learn some of the basic rules of the CFL and the unique game played here in Canada.
We'll see you then.